Welcome to The Future is No Code. I'm excited to be joined here today by Tara Reid. If you're not familiar with Tara Reid, she gave an incredible TEDx talk back in 2015 in Detroit, I believe, that kind of kicked off this whole movement. We didn't call it no code at the time. It was without code. We'll get into that in a little bit, but welcome. She has an incredible boot camp and a program called Apps Without Code, where she's taken, over 300 entrepreneurs and turned their, visions into reality. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Cool. Is there anything going on in Apps Without Code or anything you want to talk about with yourself?
Yeah. So we actually just redid our curriculum. So Apps Without Code is an 8-week training program for people who have an app idea that they want to turn into a business. And so we do the business building itself, so marketing strategy and business strategy, but also help folks build the app too. And so we just did a whole revamp of our curriculum. So the whole team's in the middle of getting ready to release that next week.
Nice.
And it includes this really fun, smart workbook where you put in information about what you want your app to do and what you want your business to do. And it tells you what next steps to do in the process of launching this. So I'm really excited about that. We've gotten great feedback on it.
Yeah. And that's incredible. I mean, now that the software is coming out that allows people, to make software, now we're figuring out, okay, what are the systems that we need to be teaching people that are around, just building is one part of the problem. So, it's exciting to have resources around the other, coming up with the idea to launching it, all that kind of other stuff.
Yeah, and figuring out how to monetize all that good stuff.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So we'll kind of jump into it here. So I'd like to start out with a little intro to no code section first here. So obviously a little bit of this has been documented in your TEDx talk, but kind of when did you get into no code, and what made you kind of take the plunge into that?
Yeah, so I started building without code in probably 2014. And I had an idea for an app that was going to help people find affordable art for their homes. And this was really before a lot of platforms that are out there now were available. So my first experience building without code was taking tools that were not intended to be app builders and kind of hacking them to create an app-like experience. So that's how I got started. I actually used Survey Gizmo was one of the first tools that I used. So when people signed up, they told us about what kind of art they liked. Like, I like photography, or I like paintings. This is my first company called Collecto. So I like photography, I like paintings. And we would take their taste. And then Survey Gizmo is a survey software. And so it has this functionality to show and hide different things based on your previous answer. Yeah. And so if somebody liked photography and had a budget of under $500, we would show all the photography under $500 and hide everything else. And so that was my first no code experience, was taking a survey, hacking it to kind of create an app-like experience for my customers, and using it to dynamically show people art recommendations. And people would email me back and say, oh my gosh, your app is so cool. It wasn't really even a full app at that time. But we made our first $35,000 with that hacked together survey, and then got some investment from 500 Startups Accelerator. So that was my first entry point into building without code. It was more so me being scrappy and just trying to find a way to validate my idea with surveys.
Cool. All right. So then, what is your kind of, again, this is really kind of new industry. It's all kind of happening. So part of this question is helping to define this. And again, I'm trying to get the perspectives from everyone. So what is your definition of the no code space? What do you consider to be no code, and what do you not consider to be no code?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think I kind of would isolate between there's no code app building, and then there's also just sort of other things that you can do with no code. So for example, you could put, in theory, all sorts of email newsletter softwares and website builders into the no code space, things that you previously needed to code to do that you no longer need to.
Yeah.
For me, I primarily am thinking about apps where you can log in and have information saved about a customer. And so for me, I kind of scope it there when I'm talking about the no-code movement. However, there's all kinds of other tools that you can use. For example, like Zapier is a really cool tool to connect different softwares together. Zapier does not give you a login portal that people can log into. It just kind of works in the background. So I actually might not include that. It depends, right? Like I kind of have two different camps.
Okay.
Right. So there's no code for apps and then there's no code for other, and I kind of camp them to get separately.
Okay. But then you're kind of classifying the other one, the wider net, as like you had to previously code to make it, but now you don't. So for example, I guess like you never had to code maybe to like make a like printed brochure, so you wouldn't count like, you know, Illustrator, I get Adobe Illustrator product as like a no code tool, if that makes sense.
I wouldn't, but I think the thing about the definition of it being something that you previously had to do but you no longer have to do, or recently don't have to do, is that benchmark moves, right? So like in 5 years from now, there will be things that we'll be saying like, of course you no longer have to code for that. And I think we'll kind of have a moving needle of what is surprising to be without code, right? Like, because the concept of no code and this term we're kind of using in the context of like, we're surprised by, or it is unusual that you can do this without code. And that's kind of like the unusual, or we're surprised that component is kind of like underlying in the word when we talk about no code. But that then changes. What's unusual changes. Would you put website builders, Squarespace, WordPress, those sorts of sites in no code?
So I personally would, because I consider that to be something you had to make without code. So I don't necessarily delineate it as the app portion or the logged in user portion, but that's my take. But I know I'm excited to see what everyone says about those things. Okay, so let's see. Kind of tailing off that a little bit. So it hasn't always been called no code, obviously. So when do you think that started, and do you have somebody that you credit with actually starting that, or when do you think that like, you know, kind of came about?
That's a good question. I think maybe Vlad from Webflow is the first person I heard saying no code. And I think we were calling it different things before that. I think I was referring to it as like building something without code. But I think that Vlad is probably the first person I've heard at Webflow call it no code specifically.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, and then the final one in this little intro section here, we have to settle some sort of grammatical debate that we have going on here, which is it no dash code or is it no space code?
I personally like no space code, just from like a accessibility and marketing perspective. No dash code feels like a almost like a nerdier version that only sounds accessible to people who are already in tech insider world. For me, great.
Cool. Yeah, this is like one of those fascinating ones that I'm really excited to.
Yeah, and I think even calling it no code, like I'm not even sold that we will continue to call it that.
Yeah, that's kind of. Do you have any thoughts of like what it might become? What term?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to have a name. I think it's going to be just normal.
Okay, all right, cool.
Like the fact that we're calling it no code assumes it's like really surprising and very different. I think there will be a point where like there are some young people who had no idea that you could only code some of these things.
Right. Yeah. Cool. All right. So kind of the heart of this series and interview is really like, how is this going to impact all of the different people involved? So I kind of have it broken down into 4 main groups here. So the first one is like businesses. So how do you think this is going to impact entrepreneurs who are starting new businesses? How do you think this is going to impact small businesses that exist today? And how do you think this is going to impact larger, more enterprise type businesses?
Yeah. So I think that it's probably mostly going to have impact on larger enterprises and starting entrepreneurs first. Starting entrepreneurs is what I get to work with a lot. So I get to see a lot of those folks who previously thought that they had to put their idea on the back burner because all they could do was pay $20,000 to have someone build the app for them, or spend like a year or more learning how to code. And like those are the options. So for them, there's a big incentive to learn this, and it's really exciting. I think there's a huge opportunity there. I think there's also a lot of opportunity, probably like the second tier of opportunity or second greatest opportunity I see is for enterprises. I remember when I worked at Google, I spent so much time like building out dashboards on marketing and operation teams, building out dashboards and like hacking Excel and different tools to like create things, and being able to build internal tools like that, I think is the second greatest opportunity. I think it just requires a little bit more buy-in at a large enterprise.
Yeah, and I think it requires a little more like training yourself to think about those processes as being apps, as not, that you can actually do those types of things.
And getting the whole team on board with that as well.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so the next grouping is kind of like the tech industry, or more like the traditional, what you would say today. So like, what do you think this is going to mean for current developers or developers in the future? And what do you think this is going to mean for like your UX designers? And then what do you think this is going to mean for project managers?
Yeah, I think of that group that you just kind of mentioned, UX designers have the biggest opportunity because they are able to bridge this gap of I designed it, but now you have to go send someone else to build it, or send my design to someone else to build it. They're able to close that loop and almost start more comprehensive design businesses or design practices by having access to these no-code tools. So I would say that like for designers, it's a really, really big opportunity, and there's so much similarity. Like there's so much similarity between how a no-code software tool works and how design software tools work that I find that designers pick it up really fast.
Yeah. And then what do you think it's going to do in terms of the like potentially the like designer developer handoff at like a traditional in a traditional process today, right? Because like obviously it's first disrupting the entrepreneur who has no handoff, but you know, at some point it will start impacting more of the traditional process. So how do you think that'll kind of play itself out?
Well, I think it'll open up the scope of what the traditional process looks like. So for example, at Apps Without Code, we recently added an app done for you service for our students. And so we're able to, we promise 4 weeks, but sometimes we can get it done in 1 or 2. And so the speed with which we're able to build out apps for clients, the price point we're able to do it with, like those things will change really dramatically. I think that we'll probably see traditional developers move a lot more slowly to adopt it, but I think we'll see new types of development shops pop up as well.
Cool. Yeah. That's kind of getting to our nice little segue into our next group. So what do you think will happen with both the kind of like traditional dev shops to what is this going to mean for your more like typical freelancers today? And then also the third one is like, what is it going to be for more like business consultants today that don't necessarily do, I guess, dev stuff?
Yeah. So I would say that for freelancers or traditional dev shops, I think that we'll still, I think one of the common misconceptions about the no-code movement is that we will no longer need code or we will no longer need traditional development. I think that it'll stay in place, but I think that those sorts of shops, those sorts of people who are doing that freelance work will start to see clients come to them that are a little bit further along because they've made version 1 of the product. Maybe they've made some money with version 1 of the product, and now they want to add a bunch of things based on feedback they got from users that they want to go to a traditional development shop for. So I think that they'll still be around. I think that they'll just be working on for better fleshed out ideas.
Cool. And then what about for like more of like the, I guess I'd say the non-dev consultants. So maybe more of like your IDEO type to more of like your actual traditional consulting, like the big.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought a lot about that use case.
Yeah.
I can totally see IDEO and some of the even like Google design team like using this as a tool. But I think that probably like they have so much from a resource perspective in terms of hiring developers that I think that we probably will see them maybe later on jump onto this just from an urgency perspective and a need perspective.
Cool. Okay, then the last one is kind of the largest one in general society, right? So all the other people we haven't talked about. So what is this going to mean for more like our personal lives to what is this going to mean for kids? And then also maybe the largest impact is like, what is this going to mean for economic disparity or, connecting global regions and everything like that?
Yeah, I think it'll mean a lot for young people. And I think it'll mean a lot for like underserved populations. So like, for example, Apps Without Code last year, we just partnered with a organization and we had our curriculum in Illinois Tech, at Stanford, and at Wharton. And so on their campuses, they had high schoolers come for the summer and be able to access college experience, but also learn how to build apps without code. And we built augmented reality apps using the Apps Without Code curriculum, using Spark AR, which is from Facebook.
Yeah.
And so like that sort of thing, that program was primarily like Black and Latino young people from high schools. And like it gave them a whole nother world of opportunity and leg up on skill set. So I think that it's going to be a huge, huge opportunity. We're starting to do some partnerships to like help push that forward, but I'm seeing other people do it too. It's exciting.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. So then let's see. The next little class thing we do is some predictions. So it's going to be tough, but try to give either like, months or years range type of a thing, or how much in the future do you think this will start happening? So the first one is, when do you think it'll be as common as it is today to make a PowerPoint presentation as it is for somebody to make an app, right? So like, tons of people today, either in school or at work, like whip out a PowerPoint or slides or Keynote or whatever it is. So when do you think that'll kind of become as commonplace to make an app?
You want a year? Like number of years?
Sure, yeah. You can have a range too if you want to like head to that.
I'm gonna go with 7.
7. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Next one.
I think we're ways out from that.
Okay. Next one is about classes and education system. So when do you think this will start making its way into college courses? And I'm not necessarily saying like, well, there's a major for code, but I'm saying like, when do you think it'll be typical for there to be courses in that? And then also, when do you think that'll kind of happen into the grade school level?
I think 3 to 4 years, just like I'm already seeing it happening. So 3 to 4 for it to be common.
Okay, next one is, when will there be more products launched on Product Hunt that are built without code than ones that are built with the traditional, coding way?
I'm going to go with 2 years.
All right, 2 years. All right, next. So like right now, you talked about a little bit, you mentioned this before, but like there is a low code space. And so like, when do you think the current maybe no code platforms will like make their way to having the same functionality that the current low code ones have? And then like, what is perhaps a little more of an extra answer on this one, but then like what will kind of like happen when that happens, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I don't know that it will necessarily happen that they'll have the exact same level of functionality. I think that actually is a good thing, right? Okay. There's something accessible about no code that as you add on more and more features becomes less accessible. Yeah. So I will say, so the question is when it's common for them to have the same functionality?
Yeah, like one of the ones like today that are around will have what we would say like what low code today has in terms of like
functionality. 3 years.
All right. Okay, next one is, when will we see a product that is built without code that reaches the level, and I don't mean like the no code like platforms, right? I mean like, when do we see a product that is built without code that reaches the level of popularity and like users as like a TurboTax, like, hello sign Trello type of level. Like, hasn't IPO'd yet, but maybe because it got bought out and, that type of thing.
Yeah.
When will it be like as popular where you're like Trello or whatever,
I would say like 3 to 4.
All right, cool. And then kind of piggyback off this, when do you think one will actually IPO?
Oh, got it. Probably same time range.
Okay.
I think it'll be either or. Yeah.
All right, cool. Next one is, when will there be more freelancers and agencies and dev shops that use no-code tools than ones that don't?
I would push that out pretty far. The reason I would push it up pretty far is because I think there's still more website agencies that use code than no code. And we've had that technology for a long time. I would give it like a 10.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, the final one, which I'm really excited about. When do you think the global leaders will start? So like presidents or politicians, or, when do you think we'll start hearing them refer to this? And maybe they won't even say no code at that time, like you're saying, but when will they kind of get behind this? Not that they're against it right now, but you know what I mean? When will they start to be like, oh, you can do these things?
Yeah, I think that in about 2 years, we'll start to see a lot more of them using the technology themselves. The reason I think that is because I have a lot of the students in my program white label their apps, and I have a few that work in this space that white label their apps to politicians and organizations. So I would say a few years, and I think it'll show up like they're using it as a way to keep their own costs low and produce products.
Awesome. Okay. Final question here, and this one's open-ended for you to kind of take it. So what is maybe your most or what is like either the most interesting thing you've seen built without code, or maybe what's the best story, or like something that's happened out of this kind of, revolution that, you're excited about, that, maybe you tell your friends and that kind of stuff?
I'm most excited about seeing entrepreneurs that are making money for themselves and like really starting new careers for themselves, or revitalizing their careers. So like I can think of like 2, for example. I just worked with an entrepreneur who's building an app for farmers and have like this whole community that are using his app. It's really fun and like totally not something I would think of as a use case, but like great to see it expanding outside of just like our tech industry bubble.
Yeah.
And also like there's another person who's gone through my bootcamp program who built an app to help manufacturing plants become more efficient and licensed it to Coca-Cola. So like I get really excited about seeing folks who are like taking this, white labeling their apps to organizations or to people, and creating real income for themselves, large checks for those white label deals. So those are the kinds of things I get excited about. It's like the non-sexy industry use cases of no code.
Yeah, which is one of the powers, where it's like you don't necessarily need either the traditional people who would be able to make those things, who aren't interested in maybe those topics. And then on top of that, you also don't also necessarily need the financial backing that maybe has traditionally been there, where you need to, this thing needs to scale to a level of Facebook, or I'm not going to, not going to invest. So then it doesn't really go. Yeah.
That's right.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for chatting with me here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Awesome. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.